James, wait! As I said that, he stopped dead in his tracks and turned around and jerked his head to face me. It was lunchtime and we were outside on the grounds. There was noise surrounding us everywhere as all the kids ran about as usual. I hesitated, but I had already made up my mind. James, what's wrong with you nowadays? You've changed. I asked my best friend, looking at him with a determined expression on my face. Eyebrows furrowed and raised, hands on hips, and a fiery blaze in my eyes. He looked at me with his puffy, tired eyes. He had an annoyed expression on his face. As his steely gaze bored into me, I felt my determination quicken. He put his hands in his pockets and walked away. Well, wait, James, I started calling after him, but it was too late. He'd already run off. I sighed heavily and shook my head. I'd run after him, but I knew it was no use. He'd run off again. Dejected, I returned back to my lunch table. I slid into my seat. "He didn't tell you anything, did he?" said Carla as she munched on her sandwich. "I told you he wouldn't," said Olivia, sounding triumphant. "He's been acting real strange these past few weeks. He doesn't raise his hand in class anymore, and for a straight A student, that's pretty sus. He doesn't even hang out with you anymore, Sam, and you're like his best friend in the world, so that's even more sus. Overall, he seems very gloomy all the time." I know, Olivia. I've been trying to get a word out of him for days, but he just ignores me," I said. "Maybe you should let him be," suggested Carla, but I cut her off at once. "No, Carla, he's been my friend for so long. Do you think I'm gonna give him up so easily?" I snapped as I picked up my lunch and angrily marched away. I could see a stunned look on the girls' faces as I walked away angrily. Another day where I sat on the bench in the local park, pondering about life when they approached me. I was staring at the ground blankly, dejected with my hoodie covering my head, hoping no one would notice me. The rebels of the community. The bad boys. "Hey James, you seem pretty sad nowadays, don't you?" said Aiden, the leader of the group. I sighed and pulled my hoodie down and looked up at him. "What do you guys want?" I asked. "Oh, nothing in particular," Aiden said. "Just wanted to cheer you up with a little bit of this." As he said that, he pulled out a cigarette from his pocket. I looked at it horrified. He extended his hand to give it to me, but to my surprise, it was slapped away by Sam's hand. Before I knew what was happening, she had dragged me away. I was too surprised to resist or respond. The boys looked surprised as they saw me being dragged away. She dragged me to a secluded spot in an alleyway. I stirred. She looked at me with tears welling up in her eyes. "James, please tell me what's wrong. You know how those boys are. They'll make you just like them. If you go down that path, so please," she said, her voice cracking, sounding like she was going to burst into tears. I stared at her blankly. She continued looking at me. Then I finally made up my mind. I stared at the ground again, not meeting her eye to eye. "It's just that I've been having trouble at home recently. My parents have been fighting a lot and things are just bad." "Thanks for telling me, James. You know, I was really worried about you because you changed a lot. It hurt me when you were ignoring me, but now I understand why. Anyways, I can help you with your parents." I just looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. "So, that's what's happening," I said to Mr. Johnson. He was kind of like the community leader in our small town and a very close friend of James's family. If there was any trouble anywhere, people would come to him to resolve it. "Don't worry about it, Sam. I'll make sure to do something about it," replied Mr. Johnson. I heard a knock at the door. My parents were having a shouting match again. I tried to calm them down, but as always, they didn't listen to me. I didn't know what to do, so I just ran over to answer the doorbell and was surprised to find Mr. Johnson standing there. "How are you, James? Doing well?" he said. Mr. Johnson, I'm fine, but what are you doing here? Could you please leave and come back later? I said, worried that he would hear my parents yelling. "No, my dear boy. Actually, I have come for your parents only." I had no choice but to let him in. He went straight to the room where my parents were having their shouting match. He told me to wait outside. I waited, and he came out after 10 or 15 minutes. The shouting stopped, but I could still hear some muffled voices. I tried to listen through the wall and heard, "Oh my God, really? We didn't think of how you would affect James," said by my mother. Her voice sounded full of regret. Mr. Johnson finally left. "Well, I must go now, my dear boy. Have a good day." I looked at him, confused. My parents came out with not angry expressions as I expected, but one filled with regret and understanding. "James, come with us," my father said. We silently walked to the living room. "Mr. Johnson has told us everything, James. He told us that you told Sam about our fights, and she told him about them too," my mother said solemnly. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't think that she would tell Mr. Johnson," I said, sounding panicked. "It's okay, son. We understand that this must have been hard on you. You're just a teenager after all, and you have enough things to deal with without us adding to your plate. We are truly sorry about these fights we're having. You know that I lost my job recently, and things have been strained between us. We should have thought of how all this would affect you," my dad narrated. I just looked at them blankly. My father sighed and continued, "But we promise this won't happen again. We'll figure out a way, we always do. And stay away from those bad boys around here too. And thanks Sam as well." It seemed that it had worked. He seemed much more cheerful nowadays. He even started hanging out with me again. I was glad to have my old best friend back. "Thanks, Sam. I think that you finally made my parents realize their mistakes, and just thank you for that," James said. "Of course, James. No matter what, I'll always be there for you," I said as I grinned brightly at him, and he grinned back. So that's the end of this story, guys. What do you think of it? Write down in the comments, as always. So before you do that, I want to tell you the takeaway. The takeaway of this story is that when there's trouble, then real friends stick around to help. So that's the main takeaway of this story. See you guys next time. Bye!